And I am doing my project on Egyptian mythology and retelling some of the myths from their pantheon. I am currently dog sitting right now, so if you do hear barking or me yelling at a dog named Tito, I'm not crazy and yelling at the bottle. I'm yelling at the dog that just ate up my shoe. Anyway, I decided to take this history class because I like ancient history more than I like more modern history, like World War II kind of stuff. And I like hearing about the mythologies from other worlds. So I thought, or like other civilizations, I should say. So I thought this would be a fun class to take. And let's get started into the project itself. Egyptian mythology is one of the world's first large pantheon of gods. It has been thousands of years, and the stories are still told today as hundreds to thousands of tourists flock to the Great Pyramids, the Sphinx, both in Cairo, and then the Valley of the Kings in Luxor. The hieroglyphs inscribed into these buildings, the tombs, depending on which area you are, the hieroglyphs tell the story of the underworld and how the soul travels through the realm of the dead to reach paradise. The stories themselves teach us lessons about how mummies were made, how the pharaohs were created, and how they believed the world was created. These are the stories and lessons and knowledge that they gave to the ancient Egyptians. In the beginning, before there was time, water spread in every direction. Napoli, page 12. In the ancient Egyptian creation myth, the world was an ocean of chaos, called Nun, that gave birth to the god Ra, the sun and god of creation. From his spit flew Tefnut, the goddess of moisture, and Shu, the god of dry air. As Ra began creating land and plants, Shu and Tefnut wandered off and played into the dark, but they became lost. Ra took out his eye and sent it looking for his children. When the eye found them and brought them back, it is said that, quote, she wept bitterly and her tears became the first human beings. Ra then placed his fast eye on his brow as an enraged cobra to be with him ruling till the end of time. Wilkinson, page 226. After this, many things began to mate, which gave Tefnut and Shu the idea that they could mate as well. From their union came their children Nut and Geb. As Nut and Geb laid together, they created the stars. Shu ended up separating them, making Nut the goddess of the sky and Geb the god of earth. After the separation, Ra discovered that he could become reborn, traveling across her thighs, down her spine and neck, then traveling through the underworld called the Duat, creating the night and the day. Quote, he rose as a baby. By midday, when the boat arrived at the first knob of Nut's spine, he was a man in the prime of life. He set in the evening as an old man, tottering on a short stick. Napoli, 22. Before their father had separated them, Nut had become pregnant, and out came the 5 new gods: Nephis, Set, Isis, Arias, and Horus the Elder. At this point, the 9 gods were called the Ennead, or considered the main pantheon of the gods. While the 4 newest gods were separate entities, Horus the Elder, sometimes called Heru-Ur, was, quote, the embodiment of Ra himself at midday, Napoli 26. While in the day, Ra traveled the sky, but at night traveled through the underworld, killing off monsters that were set in his path. One of these monsters was Apophis, the chaos serpent, and after each defeat, the sun rose again. The Egyptians had a end of the world prophecy that when the sun is swallowed by the serpent, the world would be plunged into darkness and then end, meaning that if Apophis wins, the world is ending. As the sun personified, Ra was king of all of Egypt, all of the land, of all. Isis and her siblings grew up and walked the earth, beloved by the humans. Isis was one of these. Her status as the goddess of magic made her extremely powerful, and she had even been able to raise her husband from the dead. But Isis had wanted more power. She sought out the secret name of Ra. During the evening, when Ra was at his weakest, Isis gathered some of his spit and used it to create a venomous snake. The snake then bit Ra, infecting him with a venom that could not be destroyed without the use of his secret name. Quote, Isis, radiant with power, said she would drive out the poison if Ra would tell her his secret name. Wilkinson, 229. With Ra's secret name now under her control, Isis used it to usurp him and make her husband, Osiris, the king of all, or, well, of Egypt. Set, their brother, saw his brother becoming famous and grew extremely jealous. Set devised a plan to take the throne by trickery. Quote, Set held a banquet. He gave the goddesses lotus flower necklaces, knowing that it would endear him to Isis. He served them bread and great quantities of beer, and as they were lolling around, sedated, he pulled a cloth away to reveal a beautiful box. Napoli, page 35. From this, Set proposed a challenge. Anyone who could fit perfectly in the box is its rightful owner and may take the box with them. The trick was that he managed to make it perfect for Osiris. So, while each guest tried and failed, it was finally Osiris's turn. When Osiris laid in the box, and he ended up being a perfect fit, Set quickly sealed the box and threw it down the Nile River, trapping Osiris inside. Isis chased the box, and from then Set was able to become the king of Egypt. As Isis was unable to catch the box because it flowed too upriver, too fast. After finally tracking down the box outside of Ethiopia, she found her husband dead. As she attempted to resurrect him, Set stole Osiris's corpse, chopped it up, and spread the chunks across Egypt. Quote, Isis and her sister Nephthys gathered all the fragments. With the help of Anubis, quote, unquote, the jackal god of the dead, and Thoth, the moon god, the sisters pieced them together to make the first mummy. Wilkinson, 232. After all the pieces were assembled, Isis and Osiris had one last night together, for the spell that had brought Osiris back would only last until dawn. Then he would have to descend into the underworld and become the king down there. After this night, Isis became pregnant and gave birth to their son, the god Horus. Horus grew up in secret, and when he was of age, he challenged his uncle Set for control of Egypt. Quote, in the Osiris myth, the second plays the role of the faithful son, who, as the texts have it, defends his father, or in other words, appears in defense of his father before the court of the gods. Unquote. Van Voss, page 58. Horus and Set battled for the throne for about 80 years, and through many tricks and thievery, Set tried to win the challenge for the throne. One of the things that Set did to try and get rid of Horus was blind him, but then Isis was able to heal him. Another challenge was to make a ship out of stone. Quote, Horus plastered over a ship made of pine, while Set had made his from a mountain peak, and then it sank. He was so furious that he turned into a hippopotamus and wrecked Horus's ship. After this, Horus was awarded kingship, and Set was exiled to the desert. Wilkinson, 233. By defeating Set, Horus had become the god of kings, leadership, and a war god. While there are hundreds more of these stories of these gods and their adventures, there are still lessons to be had. Some of the obvious ones being, maybe don't kill your brother. While most are just origin stories for the gods and how specific things came to be, they do pose an important part in view into their culture. Such as the story of Osiris and Isis explains how and why the mummies are made and why there is such an importance of a proper burial. Including this is called the Book of the Dead. It is a spell book and ritual book that describes all of the things associated with the funeral rites of the ancient Egyptians, along with their specific beliefs about eternal life. To quote, the Egyptians believed in a future life of some kind is certain, and the doctrine of eternal existence is the leading feature of their religion. Budge, page 65. The book also brings up spells related to the gods being mutilated, which is a common theme throughout many of the stories. To quote Joseph Abnged, the decapitation of specific deities, like Osiris and Khepri, indicates their invisibility rather than their death. In other words, these new headless gods would be restored by the solar discs, replacing their missing heads. While they are retold today as ancient religion, author Riordan wrote a trilogy of books centering around the Egyptian myths called the Kane Chronicles. It centers around siblings Carter and Sadie Kane, as they discover they are the descendants of Egyptian pharaohs and must stop the god Set from destroying the world after their father releases the spirits of the gods back onto Earth. While the ancient religion is not widespread as it was back then, there are still ways we can use the Egyptian stories to discover more about the past. They had kind rulers for their expansion. They didn't really expand too much past the Nile itself, which was kind of their lifeblood. And it did bring up how a dynasty can last for so long. put on top of that the things that they did wrong. Like, slavery is bad. But I think that we can use the stories and the history of ancient Egypt to help deal with the main issues that we have today in our modern world.